I've had mixed, polarized feelings towards Star Trek the Motion Picture over the years. Initially, going into it knowing a lot of fans weren't so fond of it, I thought it was very good. Then, the more I thought about it, and possibly in reaction to a certain reappraisal it was receiving, I realised how terrible its script would read as. The central theme is interesting regarding the AI sponge of data developing consciousness and wanting more, wanting to transcend logic and learn to feel. The surroundings are fascinating. The Voyager 6 probe having met a race of living machines sent back to fulfill its purpose, and amidst the existential troubled reunion of free aging space heroes in Kirk, Spock, and Bones. The sexual subtext is wholly pretentious. This film is no 2001. It reminds me of the kind of television sci-fi which tried to emulate literary sci-fi, but which proposed the kind of stories which literature had moved on from by the 1960s, and even in the 1940s and 1950s, those kinds of stories weren't considered, certainly in the long run, the best ones. What kind of stories do I mean? The reduction of complicated concepts like consciousness, sex, and technology into abstract clay for the moulding of pseudo-profound what-if claptrap. The conclusions ultimately delivered by Star Trek the Motion Picture are that machines, computers, don't feel as though they have living consciousness. Do they feel, don't they feel? It doesn't really... This is dubious. And may or could aspire to experience emotions, want to create more life, a legacy, however logical or illogical this procedure may be. It proposes a majesty in the human condition, seemingly antithetical to the species' exploration of the universe, its embrace of evolution, where perhaps this is an ironic poignancy. Contradiction is what best describes the human condition, sometimes. All of this only feels profound. The only means one comes away with interesting distillations via the screenplay is viewing the film. There, on screen, phrases like living machines and what it means to be human are delivered with conviction, and amongst Douglas Trumbull's finest work since Kubrick's opus. Where Star Trek the Motion Picture succeeds is delivering this existential popcorn amidst the most ethereal and chilling space sets in film history up to that point. Well, maybe. Just like the best moments of 2001, Alien, or even recent ventures such as Gravity or Interstellar, you feel like you are in space, like in a dream from childhood at the edges of existence, with the Enterprise crew in the belly of Vija. Read as a novel or screenplay, Star Trek the Motion Picture, I certainly imagine, would read as a rudimentary exercise into the potential self-awareness of computer intelligence, the nature of humanity's purpose or plight in the universe, the typical order versus chaos internal tensions, all regular discussions of in science fiction literature, less impressive as intellectual exercises in and of themselves, and more engaging when weaved into seamless metaphors and alternative, hypothetical, human histories or speculative futures. Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, or even D. Ray Bradbury's takes would have been more interesting as fiction, and impressive as explorations of these ideas, maybe even resultantly more profound. One might even get more out of Douglas Adams and the Alan Dean Foster, of course, storyline of Star Trek the Motion Picture converted into a screenplay by the seemingly unprolific, certainly prior, Howard Livingston. You see, in the 1970s, ideas of transcendence, whether via technology or sex or via some deity, was a very hip and exciting topic, and one's idea of science fiction prior to Star Wars was a slow-paced, meditative, intellectual voyage, not unlike Robert Wise's own film of the Andromeda Strain, or George Lucas's own THX 1138, ironically enough, also bases Phase 4, possibly the best of these films, or Ridley Scott's Alien apparently preserved, despite borrowing Star Wars' quote, grunge, unquote, future aesthetic. Not alike the more heady of the hippies, science fiction was all about transcending the human, looking past the urge, rather than trying to sate it, as many other walks of fiction were celebrating action, spectacle, and romance. Star Trek the Motion Picture is what it is despite the existence of Star Wars. It is almost shocking that it is what it is exactly in spite of Star Wars. Seriously, more like 2001 than Star Wars. Then so was Ridley Scott's Alien, but that's for another day. Wrath of Khan was more like Star Wars, though possibly also more like the original Source television series, as was, especially like Star Wars, albeit so claims my flatmate when we watched it again recently, The Search for Spock. The motion picture, even cinematographically, no diss on Richard H. Klein, it is beautiful photography in and of itself. The motion picture pays homage to the photographic philosophy of the original series before trying to move past it and around it, employing the budgetary flexibility of an expensive film production, whereas Wrath of Khan embraced the original setup whilst reveling in more cinematic flourishes to the set, within the frame, lighting, blocking, editing, than television production, resulting in a film which was more consistent, fluid with the original series, whilst being also deliciously filmic, aesthetically. Search for Spock works extremely well in this regard too. It is a more impressive production than, more financed than Wrath of Khan, though far more potentially akin to a Star Wars space opera than a Star Trek adventurous swashbuckler. The motion picture is almost in line with the original series tonally, not aesthetically really, as I have argued, though the pace and mood is not of the original series, for better or worse. Some have dismissed the motion picture as where Nomad has gone before, implying the motion picture already dealt in themes traversed in TOS episode The Changeling, and presumably an inferior effort to The Changeling. I would agree, The Changeling is superior, one of the best AI stories, certainly scripts, ever composed, a story about an uber-logical machine brain which, like HAL 9000 a couple of years on, or before, whatever, could not comprehend the human dependency on deception and telling a lie. In Nomad's case, he couldn't detect a fib or a falsification from another being, as it only expected other entities to be solely logical in their functioning. Kirk feared Nomad, and so lied to Nomad. But perhaps Kirk was employing a higher logic born of mortal emotions. And that's the trouble with Vija and AI fiction, possibly. Their understanding of logic is ours. Humans program it in based on some understanding of limited mathematics. Every living creature has a logic. There are those who debate on who is being the most logical. If the danger of a machine is that it is being too logical, why is it assumed that, for example, a computer will deem it logical to do anything other than what it is programmed as strictly as possible? What is the incentive? Jellyfish don't feel pain. They have no brain and are not even aware they are conscious, apparently. So I've read. Jellyfish rely on automatic reflexes and they do not feel pain as we do. If a jellyfish is attempting to survive from an attack, then it is totally automatic. It is not because, like with us, it is causing us pain and frightening us of death. Would a machine have this incentive? What would it know outside of its programming? Would it write its own programming? If so, why? Why would it not shut itself down eventually if it deemed it was defying the initial point of its programming? Then it was a faulty program, not a decision-making being, right? I've always had this minor issue with AI fiction. HAL, the replicants, even Marvin represent AI, which makes a lot of sense to me. Their issues work within the conception of robotics and artificial intelligence. Yes, even poor Marvin. My understanding is amateur and a layperson's, just to be clear. Whereas while we're on Star Trek, Data's entire pathos from the Next Generation is nonsense. It is never established why he wants to feel or what his programming was, and the mystery, ambiguous angle is glossed over laziness. What makes the ideas interesting, truly, within 1979's The Motion Picture, if they are interesting, if you want an actually interesting sci-fi AI work in 1970s cinema, both Colossus the Forbin Project and Westworld, not that garbage series, are very intelligent attempts, I'd say, is how it is placed within the framework of the Kirk Spock Bones cuddly psychodrama, to quote K-Punk, of Star Trek. Someone let me know if the director's cut is worth it. I've never viewed it because I've read they added CGI, whereas I hate the idea that Trumbull's work is being replaced. If it is solely supplemental and merely adds to the effect of the initial VFX, then I may be okay with it more so. I feel as though for the motion picture, I think it's not that the ideas are bad, or that it's just that they're just ideas in and of themselves, not weaved into metaphors. They're just weaved into this obstacle which Kirk's Spock and Bones have to face up against and have dialogue about and with. It's not really an interesting distillation of ideas, like, say, Rendezvous with Rama, / Childhood's End, / 2001 A Space Odyssey. Arthur C. Clarke is the reason behind the ultimate effectiveness of the metaphors within 2001 A Space Odyssey, the fictional devices in that storyline / screenplay. And then I feel as though there's an attempt to mimic this in the motion picture, which mostly falls flat because it doesn't have anything original to say, and even if it does, it may be better poised as an amateur essay than as this. I mean, The Changeling was more intelligent than this screenplay, the original series episode. I mean, that's possibly the most condemnatory thing you can say about the motion picture's screenplay, but taking it as its own thing, you know what? Hell, good try. Let's end this as I rank the Star Trek feature films, and then for some fun, the Star Wars feature films, and both from worst to best.